and seems to be imagining a utopian, free market society where capitalism can thrive, which is pretty f***ing convenient when you're one of the richest people alive. And finally, he wants a single person to make this happen, which kind of sounds like Anakin Skywalker.
Well, it makes sense. Like, I know why a ton of billionaires happen to be libertarians, because it's like, if we could just get rid of this pesky government that seems to be regulating our industries, making us like not pollute as much, or making us not be able to turn as much profit, or exploit children, or just basically do the most horrendous things we can do on mass scales to destroy the planet and humanity. Yeah, that will kind of be so yeah, I'd prefer there's just no government and everyone just kind of fend for themselves. But capitalism and all that stuff, that stays. Peter Thiel! I still want to do this thing. I'm worried that the company might collapse. How's Rumble doing? Is Rumble the right-wing YouTube? Rumble Yahoo stock price. The name of the stock is Rum. They've recovered a bit. No, they're still kind of down. It's at $11 a share from its height of 13 for a little bit of a drop. It is rebounding from when it dropped all the way to 6, so I guess that is good. But I wanted to see if Rumble would buy a documentary on Peter Thiel. Oops, I think it's IE. And his ghouls. You know who's one of his key ghouls? Glenn Greenwald. Glenn loves Peter Thiel.
Oh yeah! Screw Halloween! It's Vote-vember! What's up, democracy stands? Are you ready for the midterms? Voting is cool and horny and dangerous. It's like Ana de Armas in that movie where Ben Affleck plays murder cuck. Be like Ben Affleck and cuck the vote! If you think this will be the only reference to a vengeful bro watching someone nail his wife, you will be wrong. Because this is an episode about Peter Thiel, bankroller of the Ben Affleck from the movie I mentions of the world. If that statement doesn't make sense right now, that's okay. I said it weird, and it'll barely make sense when I explain it. But rest assured, it is classic Peter Thiel stuff. Speaking of classic Peter Thiel stuff, you probably don't know what classic Peter Thiel stuff is. You might not even know who Peter Thiel is. And yet, this seemingly nonsense grouping of concepts, the midterms, vengeful cuck bros, and Peter Thiel are all interwoven. So here's some news. Peter Thiel is a name you maybe should know before the midterms happen, and after they happen as well. During? I guess you should also know who he is during the midterms.
Oh, Cody is a treasure.
Because he is
He's the
and
exact
will
opposite
be
of
a
Warren
quiet
Buffett,
but
who must
key
be destroyed
figure in American politics.
to save humanity.
Someone who really needs to be a household name, if only because he probably doesn't want to be. So here's an episode about him. Blast it at full volume in your household. What's the deal with Thiel? Let us start at the beginning of all things, the Big Bang. Then skip a bunch of stuff to, according to Wikipedia.com, quote, Peter Andreas Thiel is a German-American billionaire entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and political activist. Hey, that doesn't sound so bad. Except for the billionaire and venture capitalist and political activist parts. Also, the German part is iffy, depending on the era. Little Nazi ref for you. Get used to them. Thiel co-founded PayPal with some guy, became the first major outside investor for a college stalking app called Facebook, and supported the 2016 underdog candidate. In that he looks like the underside of a dog. Donald Trump. Admit it, if you turned over a bull doodle and saw his face, you would not be surprised. Thiel now, among other things, lurks in the background and handpicks political candidates to fund, including Blake Masters and J.D. Vance. We will be getting to those last two names in a bit, but you gotta keep watching. A little Vance tease for you hillbilly elegy fans. Some advance notice for all you hillbillion fellow G's out there. Anyway, Thiel got his start at Stanford, which he attended both for undergrad and law school. While there, he launched the Stanford Review, a conservative student newspaper currently covering such hot topics as sex positivity's war on young women and Woke Watch, in which they monitor school activity for wokeness. Also, this adorable opinion piece, a call to revitalize fun, in which the author complains that there are no cool parties on campus, which I'm sure is the problem. That's, you nailed it, guy. It's the parties aren't fun. So after school, Thiel raised $1 million dues from, quote, friends and family, which kind of just seems like one of those headlines, how I built 9 companies by eating 1 meal a week. And you read it, and it's like, oh, you're Brian Nintendo's son or whatever. He then used that money to launch Thiel Capital Management. After a few early setbacks, Thiel teamed up with Max Levchin to found Confinity, a software company that would go on to launch its flagship product PayPal in 1999. Truly blessed how all of society's great minds found their initial success by inventing banks, but online. In fact, PayPal launched the careers of enough rich people that they even
I mean, the one-liner on PayPal is like, hey, I think people will use a service that is free and facilitates them not having to go get their wallets out on the internet. It's like, that's all it really does. Like, yeah, normally you get up and you have to go get your credit card out and look at the number and everything, but now you can just push a button and that'll actually take off. It's like, I guess. But they were totally right. 100% right.
Have a nickname for themselves.
Millions of people were like, yep,
the PayPal Mafia. So spooky and tough, honestly. Kudos to Musk for not being in that photo. Now, while Musk and Thiel are probably the most well-known members of this, no better way to say it, nerd group for rich losers, other members include David Sachs, who was once the corporate vice president of Microsoft's Office division, Keith Rabois, who held senior positions at LinkedIn and Square before being ousted by sexual harassment claims, and Jawed Karim, who co-founded a little-known website called YouTube, home of the best darn talk show this side of the internet.
I was just gonna bring this up. I was like, did you all know this? YouTube gave Cody a fucking straight-up shout-out. The best talk show isn't on TV because it's some more news videos. I was like, have they watched the more extreme ones? He's got some pretty hardcore anti-capitalist videos, you know? Like, also anti-YouTube videos.
Thanks for trying, guys. And folks at home, make sure to stick around after the break for celebrity butt poker and maybe some heroin karaoke with Warmbo and the new Zets. Isn't that right, cool Warmbo? Seen any good movies lately, Warmbo?
Whoa, did Warmbo OD?
All right. So, the point is, PayPal and its mafia have launched the careers of incredibly affluent, incredibly powerful people. So it should come as no surprise that along with Musk and Sachs and Karim and all the rest, Thiel has had no problem turning his initial success into something more long-term, and frankly, more insidious. In 2002, PayPal was acquired by eBay for $1.5 billion. Once again, that is the concept of banks, but online. After that, Thiel immediately used his 3.7% of the profits, or $55 million, to angel invest $500,000 on the ground floor of Facebook. After 9/11, Thiel became more and more afraid of the threat of Islamic terrorism, which was pretty in vogue during that time. The fear, not the actual terrorism. And in response to that fear, not the terrorism, he did what any red-blooded American would do and founded a terrifying spy company that collects and analyzes government data. It's called Palantir, the data analytics company literally named after the omniscient spying orbs from the Lord of the Rings that are secretly being controlled by an evil puppet master. Honestly, a pretty apt name. Good job naming things Peter Thiel. Since then, he's continued to invest in various tech companies to become richer than God, assuming God is worth less than $7 billion. I have no information about God's net worth. It seems worth pointing out that, like the Muskster, all of Thiel's wealth has come from lucky, smart investments and being in the right place at the right time. Not actually, like, inventing anything. Thiel is credited as being co-founder and CEO of PayPal, but that doesn't really mean anything. There's no indication that he actually contributed to the development of the app or website or whatever, and even if he did, the app or website in question is, if you're following along, banks, but online. There's since been a bunch of better or different versions of PayPal because it's not a unique concept. It's not even the first. Also, did you catch that one of the founders is named Sachs, which sounds like ball sacks?
True.
Not important, but as a little news gumshoe, I wanted to leave no stone unturned, you see? And when I say stone, I mean testicle. Also, the dick in Private Dick. Both the dick and privates. And speaking of private dicks, what most people probably know Thiel for, if they've heard of him at all, is his years-long feud with Gawker Media. A feud that ended when Gawker was being sued into the ground by Hulk Hogan, the famous movie star best known for his nuanced portrayal of Rip from No Holds Barred. See, what happened was that in 2007, Gawker's tech blog, Valleywag, published a post under the headline, "Peter Thiel is totally gay, people," which, while true, was probably not the most sensitive or respectful way to tell the general public about someone's sexuality for the first time.
Yeah,
it was,
in
fact, nobody's business, until he might have chosen to make it people's business. Gawker and its media family, while it existed in this form, was pretty sleazy like that, and did this kind of stuff not irregularly. This wasn't the only person they outed, as they were once even knowingly part of an extortion scheme. It's good that this version of them is no longer around. However, the means of their demise are very debatable. Specifically, their article about him pissed Thiel the hell off, and he spent the next several years plotting his revenge. The opportunity came in 2012, when Gawker published a leaked sex tape of Hollywood Hulk Hogan having sex with the wife of his good friend Bubba the Love Sponge. If you're wondering, Bubba is the Ben Affleck I mentioned.
I was going to be like, Bubba the Love Sponge. That's the one that Tucker Carlson loved calling into and would say all those really horrifyingly racist and misogynistic things on the show.
Before,
which we
he
later
actually
called
gave the
Naughty
Hulkster
Birds.
the go-ahead for the banging sesh, but didn't tell Hogan that he was secretly recording the whole affair. He betrayed Hulk, much like how Lenny the Elf betrayed Blake Thorne at the beginning of Santa with Muscles. But I'm not here to explain classic holiday movies. Point is that Gawker published the video under the headline, "Even for a minute, watching Hulk Hogan have sex in a canopy bed is not safe for work, but watch it anyway." Because Gawker, once again, icky. After this, Hogan tells reporters he plans to sue for violation of privacy. Peter Thiel jumps on the opportunity, contacts Hogan's legal team, and bankrolls a lawsuit seeking damages of $100 million from Gawker Media. Now, normally, lawsuits concerning a celebrity sex tape don't go to trial. This can be for a number of reasons, including the fact that a sex tape-related trial is very embarrassing and expensive for the plaintiff. Gawker knew this and tried to make the suit as drawn out as possible for Hogan and force him to settle. Of course, that strategy only works if the person suing you isn't being financially backed by someone with unlimited money. So instead of a long, painful lawsuit for Hogan, it became a long, painful lawsuit for Gawker, culminating in 2016 when a jury sided with Hogan, awarding him $140 million in damages and dealing a massive blow to Gawker Media in the process. The lesson here, besides that Gawker sucks and Hogan f***s, is that Peter Thiel will fire hose money if he really wants to win something bad enough. Also, Hulk Hogan is pretty racist, and so sometimes there's just no heroes in any given story. It's like the film Gremlins 2,
Human beings are flawed,
where you're not sure who to root for, but can't stop watching the spectacle. That's, of course, featuring movie star Hulk Hogan. But despite his litigation against free speech and someone's right to be a real piece of shit, it turns out that Peter Thiel is a libertarian, or at least as libertarian as a rich guy funding major politicians gets. In a 2009 essay titled "The Education of a Libertarian," Thiel identifies human freedom as his primary political goal and as a precondition to the highest good. And it's ostensibly for these reasons that he's consistently supported right-wing and anti-tax political candidates and groups over the years. Also, because he's a very rich person and wants to stay that way, or, if anything, get richer. The scary part, though, is when in that same essay, he goes on to write that he no longer believes that freedom and democracy are compatible since, in his words, the vast increase in welfare beneficiaries and the extension of the franchise to women have rendered the notion of capitalist democracy into an oxymoron. He goes on to say that the great task for libertarians is to find an escape from politics in all its forms, and ends with the sentence, "The fate of our world may depend on the effort of a single person who builds or propagates the machinery of freedom that makes the world safe for capitalism." Overall, the piece is pretty libertarian in that a lot of it is kind of muddled and vague and doesn't offer many practical solutions. He seems to want an escape from politics, whatever that means. I assume an escape from government, or perhaps big government. Thiel lays out 3 remaining frontiers that he considers still viable for individual choice to have meaning and impact: cyberspace, outer space, and the ocean space. Because libertarians f***ing love ocean cities. Thiel himself even bankrolled one in 2008.
It's probably the most libertarian thing about me, that I always say that our future is under the sea. We have to build a Bioshock-like future because we're heating up the planet too quickly. So we'll just live under the water.
Before later announcing the project was not quite feasible. He also frames his creation of PayPal as a, quote, new world currency, free from all government control and dilution. And seems to be imagining a utopian, free market society where capitalism can thrive, which is pretty fucking convenient when you're one of the richest people alive. And finally, he wants a single person to make this happen, which kind of sounds like Anakin Skywalker.
Well, it makes sense. Like, I know why a ton of billionaires happen to be libertarians, because it's like, if we could just get rid of this pesky government that seems to be regulating our industries, making us like not pollute as much, or making us not be able to turn as much profit, or exploit children, or just basically do the most horrendous fucking things we can do on mass scales to destroy the planet and humanity. Yeah, that will kind of be shitty. So yeah, I'd prefer there's just no government and everyone just kind of fend for themselves. But capitalism and all that stuff, that stays.
That time he floated the idea of fascism on his waterfall date, where he hid Padme from assassins by sticking her on her home planet in an open field with lots of high vantage points. Overall, it's libertarianism from a rich guy, so it's focused mainly on wanting a magical land of free market deregulation. But again, it's muddled. In fact, biographer Max Chafkin has argued that Thiel's most consistent philosophy is contrarianism, even going so far as to title his biography of the man The Contrarian. In an interview with Time, Chafkin says that one of the things that makes Thiel so scary is that he thinks companies are better run than governments because they have a single decision maker. In other words, a dictator. That's taken from Thiel's book 0 to 1, in which he romanticizes and praises tech founders' ability to make authoritative decisions while comparing them to feud.
Now, if you didn't know this about Peter Thiel, there was a pretty in-depth article that kind of goes into why he's slightly advocating for some kind of dictatorship in terms of controlling and leading the country. That's actually really scary, that people should pay attention to. Glenn Greenwald immediately flipped out at the article, said it was disingenuous, it was taking quotes out of context, all this, like he Glenn washed the entire thing.
Leaders. At first glance, this seems pretty contradictory to the group of people Peter Thiel has been associating with. Libertarians are, in theory, not rock hard for the concept of a dictator or a monarchy. For that reason, there's a strong argument that Peter Thiel isn't toying with libertarianism at all, but rather Thiel and Thiel fans are more closely associated with something called the New Right, a much larger tent of political ideals that, while dabbles with the big L, often don't agree on everything. And so that's something we will get into.
Kiss M. Jolk. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
In just one
reactionaries.
Second or a few seconds. Because first, we need to cut to some ads, okay? Because unlike Peter Thiel, we are not rich.
Okay, so this is brought to you by Some More News.
It's the thing I mentioned.
You should go to Some More News and then hit thumbs up and then say, hey, subscribe, and then be like, you've taught me many things over the years. This is one of the scarier ones. Great work as always. And parlay.
Before the break. A real, somehow Palpatine returned, rebranding loop that conservatives seem to be stuck in these days. Hey, remember the Tea Party? They still around? Making Herman Cain NFTs or some shit? I am not going to look them up. Anywho, in a piece for Vanity Fair, journalist James Pogue details the inner workings of the New Right, the latest evolution of the alt-right, post-left, neo-reactionary movement that seeks to distinguish itself from both the Reaganism of the 80s and Bush-era conservatism.
And also, people are not picking up on it. There's still this kind of old dichotomy where it's like, well, there's the alt-right, right? And then there's the far right, and I guess there's kind of like fascist, neo-fascist, Christian nationalists, sure. What are these ones?
As I alluded to before, the new right is not a unified ideology. As Pogue explains, members come from a wildly diverse set of political backgrounds, from monarchists to Marxists to the literal Unabomber, who some new rightists call Uncle Ted. But the idea at its center, the core tenet that makes the new right a movement at all, is the underlying belief that individualist liberal ideology, increasingly bureaucratic governments, and big tech are all combining into a world that is at once tyrannical, chaotic, and devoid of the systems of value and morality that give human life richness and meaning. Pogue points to Curtis Yarvin, friend of Peter Thiel, an ex-programmer and blogger who goes by the online name Mencius Molebug. Many people in the new right will ironically call him Lord Yarvin, because apparently this guy cannot get enough Star Wars names. Menstrual Mold Grub is credited as a co-founder and or prominent voice for the neo-reactionary or Dark Enlightenment movement. It's basically a bunch of alt-right Silicon Valley bros that, like Thiel, believe that democracy is not compatible with freedom and want to replace it with a vague techno-monarchy. Sounds kind of familiar, right? Yarvin once put out a blog post called The Case Against Democracy with a listing of...
Which is so fucked that Glenn Greenwald is basically like the championing PR firm for this entire like outfit. Because like it's the opposite of what he always talks about. He's always just like, oh, we need to have more freedom. There's too much censorship. The liberal coastal elites are they're trying to control us all into groupthink. If you step out of the orthodoxy, they will target you. You will be canceled. All this kind of shit. It's like these people who are like bankrolling you, they want complete control. They want to be the ones controlling society and everything. That's their philosophy.
Red pills that he considered to be truths because, and this can't be understated, these guys are dorks.
Terribly buddy.
They're also pretty fucking fashy and border on white nationalist. Yarvin himself has blogged that although he does...
Lauren Southern retweeted Brianna Joy Gray. Oh my god. JC, they're stealing Ukrainian children. 500 just yesterday were shipped to Russia, and this is why we should be supporting them. We cannot allow this kind of evil to go unchecked. Don't you agree with me on that? I'm sorry, I don't. And here's why. Le epic. People on bandwagons can't handle when you ask what their moral outrage is for less popular global crises. Yes, be infuriated with Ukraine's invasion. No, don't allow yourself to be blinded into thinking we're politically motivated because there's some sort of moral motivation. You can condemn it. It's not hard. You can be like, that's horrifying, I condemn it. That's different than like, I'm ready to grab a gun and go to war today. Because yes, I am not. I'm not ready to get into a armed conflict with foreign actors in parts of the world far away from the place I live. That is true. But you can say that's horrifying and I condemn it, because I do think it's horrifying and condemn the actions of what Israel is doing to Palestine, you know, or what both Russia and America are doing to Syria, or what Saudi Arabia is doing to Yemen. I think that is all horrifying, and I condemn the actions of those governments, and yeah, this is no exception. You know, fuck Vladimir Putin.
Doesn't consider himself a white nationalist. He recognizes that many of his readers are, and said he would also read and link to white nationalist
just really
content,
happy about bad things
which
happening
sure
to kids.
Sounds like something a white nationalist would say. By one account, Yarvin once gave a speech where he defended Hitler's decision to invade other countries, calling it self-defense. Here's another blog where he doesn't seem to understand why people hate the Nazis the most, which includes the quote, "We are taught that the Nazis were bad because they committed mass murder, to wit, the Holocaust. On the other hand," and then there's more, and like, do I need to finish that quote?
No, you don't. That's just, and so everyone knows what we're dealing with, by the way. This is like directly connected to people funding this fucking shit. I'm very happy that Cody made this episode. I think this will get a lot of people to be like, oh shit, Peter Thiel's kind of scary.
But, okay, to be fair and balanced,
his
other
the
hand is pointing out that the Soviet Union also did mass murders. Okay, yes, both things can be bad. Of course, this isn't a video on Lord Yarnish Dildo Bug, the totally not racist who uses liberal democratic hypocrisy to get you to sign up for fash-adjacent neo-feudalism.
Moldbug is from a Jewish family, by the way. Yeah, I mean, that happens. Stephen Miller is also a white supremacist.
But it's important to talk about him because he's a man deep in Peter Thiel's circle. Thiel has funded Yarvin's startup, and they will correspond to discuss the politicians that Thiel backs. Yarvin and the New Right, like many far-right groups, believe in a fundamental conspiracy where the people at the top hold so much power it strips agency and freedom away from everyday people. He calls it the cathedral because nerd, and part of his belief is that there's no single entity running the show. In fact, he believes hardly any...
I like that he has peppered throughout this entire thing that they are evil nerds, just so you know. Because there's good nerds, there's awesome nerds, then there's also there's evil nerds too.
Anyone who participates in it believes that it's an organized system at all. Instead, it self-perpetuates by rewarding media that goes after threats against the established order, like nationalists, libertarians, and anti-vaxxers. Social media, according to Yarvin, only accelerates this cycle, since the best way to get clicks from someone is generally to reaffirm their worldview, which in Yarvin's eyes reaffirms the cathedral. In other words, he's describing like capitalism and the status quo or social norms, something that has existed for as long as society exists. But since he's a tech bro at heart, he's decided that this is a brand new thing he's invented and is now giving it a silly name. The solution, in the eyes of Yarvin and the New Right, is for a big, strong boy to take power back from the cathedral and replace the whole system with a regime-structured top-down, like a startup. But it's like super not a dictatorship, you guys. That's not how it's going to turn out. In that aforementioned speech where he defended Hitler or whatever, Yarvin also gave a solution to reboot the government. As a first step towards the goal, Yarvin advocates for retiring all government employees, or RAGE, a super chill and not at all scary acronym, and replacing them with what he calls a national CEO. These days, Yarvin is super duper careful not to use the word dictator, but not because he doesn't think we need one, but rather that the optics around that word are a tad bit bad. To quote Yarvin, if you're going to have a monarchy, it has to be a monarchy of everyone. Which, when you think about the definition of monarchy for more than a second, is a completely nonsense statement. That's like saying you want to have water, but only if it's a dry water. And that's how we get back around to Thiel, who, as we have mentioned, also seems to think a country should be structured like a corporation, autocratically from the top down, under a single ruling figure. Whether Yarvin and the New Right have influenced Thiel away from his purely libertarian roots, or Thiel has come to these positions on his own, it doesn't really matter. Because either way, both Thiel and Yarvin believe this stuff, and Thiel is willing to pour his money into supporting people and causes that further these beliefs. I don't know what that word means. Oh, you mean Mr. Gobblebottom. I got one of those on my ankle. So speaking of Thiel pouring his money into things, let's talk about Thiel as a political donor. Before 2016, Thiel had dipped his toe into conservative politics, donating around $3 million to
breaking. Mehmet Oz draws rebuke for holding rally at venue that bans gay weddings. Of course he did.
to Ron Paul's campaign in 2012, and another $2 million to Ted Cruz the same year. But as we've already discussed, Thiel's politics, which mirror much more closely to Yarvin and the New Right's beliefs, were never all that in line with mainstream Republican values. So when everyone's favorite loud boy Donald J. Trump came along in 2016, saying and doing things that had previously been considered unsayable and undoable, Thiel saw a chance to finally get out of the stasis of the status quo. And so he jumped on it, donating $1.25 million to Trump's 2016 campaign and speaking in support of Trump at the Republican National Convention.
I'm not a politician, but neither is Donald Trump. He is a builder, and it's time to rebuild America.
Oh, he's just like a regular guy. I was honestly expecting some kind of like dark mist or something. A guy hooked up to a bunch of tubes, maybe. After Trump won, Thiel was appointed to the president-elect's transition team. And Trump reportedly told Thiel he was a very special guy, which is like kind of a weird thing to say to a grown adult, but whatever, it's Trump, that's how he talks. Despite this early strong start to their friendship, things didn't stay quite smooth for long. In 2018, the New York Times quotes Thiel as saying, "There are all these ways that things have fallen short," pointing to his hopes that Trump would end the era of stupid wars, rebuild the country, and move us past the culture wars. In this sense, Thiel is completely correct, in that Trump did not do any of those things. Though why Thiel thought he would do those things in the first place is beyond me. In 2020, Thiel notably and intentionally stayed on the sidelines, avoiding endorsing Trump or making any major political donations at all. Whether he did this because he still had major issues with the way Trump had handled his first term, or simply because he thought Trump wasn't going to win, is anybody's guess. But regardless, Thiel stayed out of the 2020 presidential election, and thereby avoided having any personal stake in the ensuing debate about whether or not the election was rigged. You know, that debate that's somehow still going on almost 2 years later. But now, as we approach that 2-year mark, Thiel is stepping out of the shadows once more, like the spooky venture capitalist that he is, to financially back 16 conservative candidates for the House and Senate in the 2022 midterm elections. Many of these candidates, who include J.D. Vance, Blake Masters, Eric Schmidt, Kevin McCarthy, and Ted Internet Creep Cruz himself, have embraced the pervasive lie that Donald J. Trump won the 2020 election. While Thiel hasn't said publicly what he personally believes about those election results, it doesn't really matter. It should be clear by this point that Trump was just a sweaty tool in the Thiel toolbox, Thielbox, to achieve his own political ends. And these new candidates are more of the same. At a dinner for the Federalist Society last October, Thiel spoke about the deranged society that a completely deranged government had created, alluding to the same themes he references in his 2009 essay. To quote this Thiel speech, "My somewhat apocalyptic, somewhat hopeful thought is that we are finally at a point where things are breaking." Sure, a better writer might have said breaking point instead of the point at which the breaking begins to be of starting or whatever. Doesn't matter. I want to stop on that quote and go all the way back to that Hulk Hogan lawsuit against Gawker. Because if you recall, Peter Thiel wasn't like pals with the Hulkster, famous star of Suburban Commando. I doubt he even cared about this specific case. The sex tape lawsuit could have been brought on by any cast member from Muppets from Space. Fozzie comes to mind.
I can see that. I know.
No, what I'm saying is that Peter Thiel's goal there was seemingly to destabilize and ultimately destroy Gawker Media. He probably didn't care how, and it appears that this wouldn't be the only time Thiel would bankroll a clown-haired orange meat slab for the purposes of collapsing a thing. Is it? I have no way of knowing this, but judging from his apocalyptic hopeful thought that things are breaking, it's likely that he supported Donald Trump because he was the candidate most likely to destabilize the current government, perhaps become the national CEO that would give Thiel an opportunity to implement his rich guy, quasi-libertarian, neo-feudal goals. Again, just a guess. Legally speaking, I'm not accusing Peter Thiel of subconsciously rooting for the collapse of democracy, nor can I confirm or deny that Fozzie comes, but I'm working on finding that out. I've heard he calls it his wada wada.
Ugh.
There's also a take whatever you can get element to Thiel's current political strategy. As he himself said, he's not a politician. He also doesn't seem to like politics or big government. He ideally wants to have no democracy, it appears, and so he's bankrolling the people closest to that goal, whether those people are in on the goal or not. Specifically, he's funding the GOP, although I have a question about Peter Thiel and the GOP for you to rattle around in your big ol' noggin. Would Peter Thiel still support a quasi-libertarian, free market society run by a single tech company CEO type if he himself wasn't a very rich tech company CEO type? I'm not saying that Peter Thiel wants to personally be a dictator, but it's pretty funny whenever a super rich guy comes out in support of a political party that just so happens to be against taxing super rich guys and giving them lots of freedom and prioritizing the free market and capitalism.
I have voted overwhelmingly for Democrats historically, overwhelmingly. Like I'm not sure. I might never have voted for a Republican, just to be clear.
Right.
Now this election, I will. The Democratic Party is overly controlled by the unions and by the trial lawyers, particularly the class action lawyers. And generally, if you'll see something that is not in the interest of the people, on the Democrat side, it's going to come because of the unions, which is just another form of monopoly, and the the trial lawyers. On the Republican side,
like, how does anyone take this dude seriously? It's like, it's just like rich asshole telling you to your face, like, this is the way I see you. You are my fucking ants to be fucking juiced for every last fucking cent.
there's if you say like where there's something like not ideal happening, it's because of corporate evil and religious zealotry. That's generally where the bad things will be coming from on the Republican side.
Yeah, you must have known we'd be referencing this dip at some point.
Yeah.
As we pointed out in a previous video, Elon Musk was willing to brush off, quote, corporate evil and religious zealotry and vote Republican because the Democrats have unions and class action lawyers, which he hilariously considered the worst option. Which probably has to do with the fact that he's an evil corporate guy literally fighting against unions and class action lawyers. People like Elon and Thiel like to think of themselves as politically or ideologically complex, and yet their leanings always side with the people who will help them make and maintain the most money. They are, in reality, very simple people with bad haircuts who think they are very smart and important.
They got a lot of
cool
gender-affirming care.
haircuts.
Yeah.
But this is also
Gender affirming
what makes them
care
very
for the,
dangerous,
but not for
because
others.
as Musk is demonstrating, they are willing to overlook acts of evil if the people committing or supporting those acts also support the things that keep them rich. But Peter Thiel isn't just verbally supporting candidates. He's not even just kicking them a few bucks. What makes Thiel particularly dangerous, at least more so than Mr. Twitter over there, is something we are going to talk about right after these final ads. Cliffhanger! You gotta watch the ads to learn things! We trapped you! Bum bum bum! Cha. Listen, the testicles are like the dungeon of the body. Dangerous, yet appealing. And
Wait.
Lord knows when I
Sell
think
me
about
on something.
balls, I think about eating turkey. Which is why for this Thanksgiving, why not check out Manscaped's Performance Package 4.0?
Oh, that's not where I saw that one going. That was a bit of a trip. Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Juste, we shall spend many a generations building mighty cathedrals in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your oafish jesters, here to offer you a laugh at any opportunity. To our brave knights of the Round Table, Rachel K., Izzy Solidarity, Victoria Bell, Sebastian Demel, Mark Harmon, Benji Arney, Scary Earth Human, Tony, DM Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Brandon, Words Greenwood, Everything Important, Hegbert Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Doug Cady, Daniel Sutton, Jenna Tal, Dark Puppy, Quiet One 85, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, Multimondi, Trevbot EXE, Brian Ephraim, Anthropophojak, Catherine, Ramon Acosta, Nkosin, Ralph Parler, Violent Orchard, Political Puppy, La Media Panza, Todd Buckingham, and Todd La Jeunesse. We salute our valiant heroes off to fight injustice everywhere.